Hey guys, this is Khavrion, and I'm here with another battle report. This is going to be the battle report for the third round of IGL Season 3 America Edition. The mission is Decapitation, and it is going to be me playing Steel Phalanx against Cobraprime playing the Combined Army. Now, a little bit of internet history. My first infiNity game that ended up on YouTube was actually the Season 1 of Vol SC's Tabletop Simulator League against Cobraprime. That was back in N3. I was playing Nomads, he was playing Toha. And while it was really exciting to be playing in front of, 300 people or whatever, the match itself was long and a little stressful because of the audience and weird because of the dice, and it ended in a tie. So I was excited to be able to play Cobraprime again. I was a little nervous because, in that game, he and I were clearly evenly matched, but I was really happy to be able to play this guy again in an environment that was more relaxing. No audience, it's not the championship match, and, now there are bunches of Tabletop Simulator leagues, but then it was novel and new and different. So, a low-stress opportunity to play what is a good player in a more casual environment. And in a certain sense, by playing against Cobraprime again, it's a way for me to check my own personal growth to see if I've improved as a player. Next up, the mission is Decapitation. Decapitation is essentially a kill mission with a twist. The twist comes in two parts. The first part is that you are trying to kill the other guy's lieutenants. You get 2 points if you kill the same number of lieutenants, and 3 points if you kill more. And hand in hand with that killing of lieutenants is the reinforced tactical link, which means that you basically can't go into loss of lieutenant. The next twist is that there are 2 designated targets, and killing those guys are worth 2 points each. Other than that, it's 3 points for killing more army points, and there are 16-inch deployment zones. In terms of extras, there are some blizzards, and there is a defensive turret. The blizzards are basically the same as the 0G zones from the last season. Yeah, plop them down, and they become saturation zones and difficult terrain mountain zones. Normally, there are a whole butt ton of these, but on this particular mission, there was actually only one legal spot for the blizzards, and it was marked, and so we only had one blizzard zone. The defensive turret is effectively a cheap, total reaction combi rifle guy with low BS and a 360 visor. I don't know why these were included exactly, but if they were to stop Alpha Strikes from hurting as much, maybe it was a good thing to include. The only other thing I want to talk about this mission is that it really, really favors going first. In my opinion, basically any kill mission is going to favor going first. You get to do damage to your opponent, and on their turn, they have to not only do the same damage back to you, they now have fewer orders, they now have fewer pieces with which to do it, and if you've done a good job with your turn, you're in a strong position, they're in a weak position. A handful of kill missions, the most famous being Frostbite, balance the kill part with the area control part so that it balances going first versus going second, but Decapitation does not have any of that. It really does favor going first. On the other hand, because it is a kill mission, if you can defend yourself well, and if you can kill the opponent's designated targets just as well as they kill yours, you'll have a good chance of going second of still having some success. Also, from a personal perspective, one of my biggest fears with the big boy list is that Hector gets isolated and I go into loss of lieutenant, but the reinforced tactical link means that even if Hector dies, yes, I'm out his 2 extra orders from Strategos, but I won't be in loss of lieutenant, and so that's kind of nice. Okay, we've talked about mission, let's talk about lists. No surprises, I am once again running the big boy list by XNED. If I'm running Steel Phalanx, I'm basically going to run this list except in extremely specific circumstances like countermeasures. And to be perfectly honest, this mission actually favors this list a little bit because it compensates for the risk of going into loss of lieutenant if Hector gets isolated or killed. You have Achilles, the man, the myth, the legend. You have the 4 guys in the Enomatarchos with Akmon, Machaon, Phoenix, and Ajax. You have Hector, who provides orders and is really tough himself. And then you have Netrod, Lamed, Lamed. This list is incredibly tough, lots of armor and wounds, and the guys that don't have lots of armor and wounds are Machaon and Phoenix, who can throw Eclipse Smoke or regular smoke, and everybody has really good melee and dodges. The only exceptions are the Netrods and the Lameds, and I can protect those with the rest of the list. Of course, we're also fairly dangerous in the active turn, so all things considered, I think this list has a really good chance of punching really hard. On the other hand, this is something of my opponent's list. I think I've gotten the groups approximately right, and it is essentially an anathematic list for the Combined Army. Before going profile by profile on the list, I want to say that I believe this mission was specifically crafted to do classifieds in countermeasures and to keep the lieutenant safe in Decapitation. There are a handful of pretty dead giveaways in my opinion. You have a Caliban Forward Observer. I don't think the Caliban Forward Observer is generally good profile, but if you're trying to do classifieds and countermeasures, it makes sense. You have the Med Tech. Generally speaking, I would say you're better off going with a Caliban Engineer and then taking a tag. The Anathematic is an extremely safe lieutenant. It can be in marker state, and it has mimetism -6, and it's also very tough in and of itself. But it also is a hacker, and so can do hacker classifieds and probably some other classifieds as well. So as I look at this list, it seems to me like the fingerprint is pretty firm in terms of trying to accomplish the classified part of countermeasures and trying to keep the lieutenant safe during decapitation. What it gives up for that is it gives up the raw punching power of a list with an avatar or a Sphinx. It has some capability in order to attack, but as we'll see, I am very, very resilient against most of the attacks that this list can bring. Let's go profile by profile. First off, you have the Anathematic. I don't know if I love this guy, but I understand why he's here and what he's trying to do. It's a Whip 16 hacker with good BTS, 2 wounds, and NWI. It's got a plasma rifle, it's got Mimetism -6, and it's got Marker State. That dude stands a very good chance of being able to fry any killer hacker or other hacker that it can get its hands on. It can reliably target things if that's the kind of thing you're trying to do. And the plasma rifle is, of course, going to be fairly dangerous. That said, the Anathematic is slow, it's only 4/4, and it's not that great of a gunfighter, it's only BS-13 with that plasma rifle. Now, I've gotten tons of work done with Hector, who only is BS-13 and has a plasma rifle, and Hector doesn't even have access to the Mimetism -6 that this thing does. But the fact that it's slow, and the fact that it doesn't have Hector's extra order, and the fact that Hector, to be perfectly honest, isn't a mainline attack piece, means that the Anathematic isn't itself a mainline attack piece. I just don't think that this guy is going to be able to get at my list and murder my dudes and then get to safety. After that, we have the T-Drone. This is something that I'm scared of. One of the best ways to snap the neck of the big boy list is to drop repeaters next to Hector and rain missiles on his head. That's not a huge deal in Decapitation because of the reinforced tactical link, but I still don't like losing the 2 orders that Hector brings. To provide those pitchers, we have Bit and Kiss, who are, probably the best pitcher throwers in the game outside of link teams. You then have 2 Dadarazis for smoke, a Liberto who's a mine layer, a Speculo killer, we'll talk about him in a second, the Medtech for doing classifieds and healing folks, Caliban Forward Observer, again probably for doing classifieds and healing folks, and a Q-Drone, which is good for shooting things and defense. The Q-Drone is actually particularly annoying to me. I just don't have any long-range guns that can handle that dude, so I will have to be throwing smoke in order to cover him. On the other hand, it's an HMG with BS-11. He does not have an Evo hacker, so it's not going to be that dangerous to me to, for him to attack me with that thing. In Group 2, he has 2 Echidrons, whose primary function is going to be on Flash Pulse ARO to defend his Anathematic, and they also have baggage and can therefore refill Bit and Kiss if they need it. Other than that, you've got 3 Taigas. And the thing that I really want to stress as we look at this list is that a lot of its attack vectors are the kind of things that my big boy list is extremely resilient against. First off, that Speculo killer. Normally in a mission like Decapitation, the Speculo killer is going to appear on the edge of the DZ, use its 2 marker states to walk towards wherever the lieutenant is and cut its head off or boarding shotgun it to death. Not so against Steel Phalanx. If he walks into silhouette contact with Hector, 1, I'm not going to get surprised. 2, I've got a decent chance of winning the face-to-face against him with my melee ability. And 3, if he decides to double template me instead of, meleeing, Hector is guaranteed to survive because he's got armor 5, 2 wounds, and NWI. In fact, my opponent does get to go first, and he concludes correctly that there is no point to trying to sling the Speculo killer against my list because everyone is so robust against it. The other thing to note is that the Speculo killer has a monofilament close combat weapon. That's very good against tags and other multi-wound targets, but against things like designated targets, it has a very high chance of potentially just whiffing because it's only damage 14 and the target can make the armor saves. It's not likely that the armor saves are going to get hit, but it is not that unlikely either. So the Speculo killer, which is normally just a great attack piece, in this case is pretty weak. The same is true of the Dadarazis and the Taigas. Those dudes are normally very dangerous warbands, but because of how well I can dodge, because of my melee skill, and because everyone has lots of armor and wounds, even the Taiga's berserking isn't that likely to kill precious guys. A similar story to the Caliban with his boarding shotgun. Normally that dude would be able to run up and beat guys up in melee or template them with a shotgun, but I just don't have that problem with the Steel Phalanx big boy list. The only concern is that I want to make sure my designated targets aren't next to that dude because otherwise he can just slurp them up for free and get extra wounds with Prothyon. So yeah, a lot of the major threats here, aside from the missile launcher bot, are going to be melee threats, which aren't that damaging to my particular list. Next up, let's talk about the map. I guess the idea here is that it's an island in the Karage area, which is why you have all these sort of Japanese-style houses. The water down here represents the edge of the map. I think it was lapping or something like that. And then you've got all these rocks and rocky paths that crisscross the island. It is an extremely beautiful map. I believe this was made by Persian. Persian is a fantastic artist if you see his painted miniatures. And in my opinion, this is the kind of map that, had I stopped to think about it, I would expect from someone who really loves pouring a lot of energy and a lot of creativity into creating something that's beautiful. It feels vibrant, it feels thematic, it feels like something you really couldn't do in real life without having a really complicated set piece that you'd have to transport very carefully. So if we were going for a map, beauty, looking good, looking unique, taking advantage of tabletop simulator competition, this would be getting very high marks from me. That said, if you intend to play this map as the map maker made it, it is really, really, really annoying. The problem is that everything here is mountain terrain or water terrain. Every single little, rock like this guy, every big rock like this guy, that's all mountain terrain. This ocean is all aquatic terrain. And there are gaps where tiny little rocks, like right here, are interrupting the path so that you actually have to stop because you've hit the stupid things, even as you're just wandering through these two major paths that are supposed to be clear. I get that a lot of people are trying to run mountain terrain pieces because of the new season, but this map really was frustrating. Neither my opponent nor I had a chance to look at the maps before we signed up for the league and submitted our lists. In fact, neither of us had really had a chance to look at these maps aside from like right before we started playing. And basically, we both mutually agreed that the whole mountain terrain thing was too much for us to handle. It was too annoying, and we decided to ignore basically all the mountain terrain. If you do that, in my opinion, the map turns out to be pretty darn playable. It's not super open, but it's also not super closed. There are two major pathways through the center, but you could also try climbing over the outside or going around the edges. There are decent fire lanes, that sort of thing. And with that actually change made, I thought it was a pretty darn good map. The only quirk, if you do make that change, is that the only legal blizzard spot is the one that I've circled here, but that's probably okay because the map designer put that into the map intentionally and thus was able to, use it as part of the map design. So moving forward, I actually like the idea of creating a map which is so busy that there are only certain legal spots to put down the blizzards. I also like doing so with very low pieces of terrain so that, you're not just ending up with an extremely dense table with no fire lanes. But I think it's super duper obnoxious to just label every single unflat surface being mountain terrain. So much so that, my opponent and I didn't play it that way. That done, let's talk about deployments. As I've already mentioned, my opponent won the lieutenant role and decided to go first. That makes sense because of the mission. And I believe he withheld his speculo killer, which also makes sense because that's what speculo killers do. Taking you through what I am seeing, you have a Caliban for an observer. I didn't know it was a Caliban, but I was suspicious. Remember, there's 16-inch deployment zones. Taiga, I think this is the Q drone. This is the med tech. This is the missile launcher bot. It is standing. It is on aero against this line. I think that having a missile launcher bot on aero in general isn't a bad idea, but in this case, I'll be able to take advantage of it. This is the Liberto. This is the Liberto's mine. Taiga. There's a Dotarazi in this building. There's another Dotarazi right here. This is Bit and Kiss. This is his lieutenant who is hiding down there. I guess he probably withheld 2 units, one of which was his lieutenant. The lieutenant is down there. Ikadron, and his designated targets. One of them is in this building. You will notice it's right next to Liberto. That was a deployment mistake that I will take advantage of. And the other one is over here somewhere. Oh yeah, and we get a defensive turret. The defensive turret is right here. It is in cover, and it's got pretty decent lanes of fire that I can see. I haven't mentioned the speculo killer. That's because the speculo killer was deployed based on my deployment, so I'll talk about my deployment. As you know, I like castling, so I decided to castle up in this corner. I have Hector right here. He can see a lot of the ways that people could approach him, and notably, I don't believe there's a convenient way to drop a pitcher near him without him being able to see whoever is throwing the pitcher. You have a flashball spot on the ground there. You have Machaon here. He actually is below and prone, so he's not super visible. You have Akmon, who is standing. He is a little bit visible, but only along this very long lane of fire there. Phoenix, of course, king of the hill. He sees everything. Ajax is also pretty fairly up. And then I had withheld, I think I withheld Phoenix and Achilles, and I put Achilles here so that he can guard against approaches, and of course Phoenix is there. Then I have a flashball spot there, and I put down my combi rifle TR bot right here, and it can actually see his missile launcher, which will be nice in case he decides to try to launch some smart missiles at me. I'll be able to shoot him 3 times with my combi rifle. It's going to be on like 4s or something like that, but 3 dice on 4s could hit, it could succeed, it could knock this guy out. It's something that my opponent has to think about. Both of my net rods made their combat drop and are hidden underneath here. I originally wanted to put one of my designated targets over here and one over here. There weren't that many good spots to put the people on. But as it would happen, I was kind of suspicious that this was going to be a Caliban. It was either that or a Shrouded, and I didn't want to give him the chance to slurp up my designated targets and get lots of wounds. So I decided to put both of them over here at various levels of this building. Normally you can't put designated targets at various levels of the building, but there was a note on the board somewhere that said something to the effect that you could or something. I don't know. And what happened is my opponent, he pulled out his specular killer and he looked at my deployment and he thought for a while about what he would do with his specular killer to make an attack run, and he reached the absolutely correct conclusion, in my opinion, that the specular killer was not the right tool to try to attack my position, and that he was going to put the Speculo Killer and go after my designated targets instead. Here is another view of my position. As you can see, I have castled up pretty darn effectively, and the net rods are just in a very safe position. And using this picture, let's talk about my opponent's turn. He has 9 orders and 1 irregular order in Group 1, and he wants to go after my designated targets with his Speculo Killer. I have guys that are watching these two, but my opponent concludes that if the Speculo Killer is prone, which he can do pretty easily, then he will not be seen by the TR bot. So basically what he's going to do is he's going to deploy prone, walk over and kill the first one, spend another order to remarker state, walk downstairs, go prone, spend an order to walk into base to base with the second guy, and kill him too. There's a fair bit of orders being spent moving and maneuvering and remarker stating, but if his goal is to only kill these two guys, it's pretty likely to succeed. The problem is the Speculo Killer has a monofilament close combat weapon. And monofilament is really good at killing tags, but it can be fairly unreliable when it's going after low armor targets like these guys who just don't really care about the monofilament. Indeed, there are something like 3 or 4 orders between the two of these guys where they tank every single hit the Speculo Killer can throw at them. They do both end up dying throughout the course of this thing, but that is a massive order sink that cost my opponent a lot on his turn. And in many ways, this is why I think that Fides are better than Speculo Killers in a lot of circumstances. It's just because the double action close combat weapon is more reliable at taking out light infantry type targets than the monofilament is. Of course, I don't play factions that have access to that kind of thing, so maybe there's some perspective that I'm missing, but in this case, it really exemplifies exactly what I'm afraid of when I see the monofilament on the Speculo Killer. As I'm writing this battle report, I do realize that he probably could have obviated that whole concern by using the boarding shotgun in face-to-face mode 2 times, because then it's burst 2 on 18s instead of just the burst 1 on, I don't know, whatever he is with martial arts. Maybe that would have been more effective because it would prompt 2 saves instead of 1. But I don't know, I haven't run the numbers, and even if it is, I was getting fairly lucky with my armor saves, and, a boarding shotgun's only burst 2, that's not that crazy high either. It could have gone either way, and the fact is that in this case, the Speculo Killer spent a lot of orders and only killed the 2 designated targets. After which, my opponent does not have many orders with which to do things, and I think he basically just spends the 2 orders lobbing pitchers somewhere. I think that the pitchers are put there, and 1 gets put over here. They're in annoying spots, but they're not close enough to start dropping missiles on my head. All that done, I do want to give one comment, which is that I believe I actually forgot to spend a command token to strip my opponent of 2 orders. So if I had remembered to strip the orders, but he had gotten a little bit luckier with their Speculo Killers, then, maybe the game would have been basically the same. I haven't talked about what he does with his Group 2 orders yet, and it is fairly straightforward. He takes a taiga that is here and a taiga that is, I think, somewhere in here. I don't remember exactly where it is, but both of these 2 taigas basically run up here and then use their really good dodging ability so that they can dodge out to see Achilles, and then they berserk Achilles. The first taiga gets incredibly lucky with his berserk and puts 2 wounds on Achilles. The second taiga does not get as lucky, and Achilles tanks both of the hits. That's actually a fairly big deal. Only having 1 wound left means that Achilles cannot risk tripping a mine or something like that. But on the other hand, my order pool is entirely intact, and my opponent has actually lost 2 taigas during this process. That brings us to my turn. I've done some math, and I figured that if I can kill 1 of his designated targets, and if I can win on army points, then I'll have 5 points, and he'll have 4 points. So at the start of my first turn, my plan is to outlast and survive, rather than try to Rambo and Alpha Strike and kill lots of stuff. To that end, the name of the game is going to be being careful and taking out the key pieces that can be used to hurt me. The way that I intend to accomplish that, first and foremost, this Liberto is mispositioned. It is within the blast radius of the HVT. What I do is I toss a Discover with Phoenix on the Liberto. My opponent wisely says that he is not going to reveal the Liberto, but I, in my opinion, also wisely, I don't use the second order to shoot. I instead have the rest of the team move out. The reason I do this is because if Phoenix succeeds his Discover, I can shoot the Liberto on the next turn, and if Phoenix fails his Discover, then I can have somebody else, do the Discover on the next turn or something like that. As it happens, I do get lucky. I do successfully Discover the Liberto, and on the next order, I shoot the Liberto, and I kill both the Liberto and the HVT that was in the blast radius. That being done, my next major target is this missile launcher pod. I am very scared of that guy. I know that it is the tool for killing me and everything that I stand for, and so I'm going to try to take my link up here and try to kill it. In the process, I try to gunfight the Speculo who's down there. The Speculo successfully throws smoke or something like that. I don't exactly remember the details of why that happens. I think I just miss or whiff or it rolls really well, but it's not super important. The Speculo killer gets smoked down. It's something that I won't have to think about anymore for the rest of my turn. And then I get into this position. So the missile launcher bot is standing up on arrow, but even if it were prone, I think I could still see its base. There is a healer bot right there, but Phoenix has fire, and that fire is something that I'm going to be relying on because it can chew through the remote presence unconscious states pretty well, and it can put that guy straight to dead. We measure the range. I'm really hoping that we're going to be within 24 inches. I don't think we are. I think that my opponent is getting a +3 to hit from range, but he's getting -6 for mimetism, -3, -3 for cover, and I'm only burst 3 on 13s. So if this goes badly, Phoenix could be raining little meat pellets down from the heavens. But as it happens, it doesn't go badly. I think I win the face-to-face and I hit with like 2 of the rockets and the missile launcher bot just burns to death. If I had failed, I probably would have just taken Achilles and run Achilles up here and used Achilles to try to take out the missile launcher bot. But as it stands, I am pleased that I don't have to do that. I think this actually doesn't cost all that many orders too, because this is the picture that I have for the end of my turn 1. And if memory serves, what I basically end up doing after withdrawing to a defensive position here with the Anomatarkos, I reform a link with Akmon and Achilles, and I basically run Achilles over in this direction, trying to kill a Taiga that's hiding here, and a Dadarazi that is standing right there. I don't believe I successfully kill the Taiga. I just don't quite have the orders, and because there's a repeater right there, I think I'm able to use Achilles to kill the Dadarazi, but I have to use Akmon to attack the Taiga, and for reasons I don't exactly remember what happens, but Akmon doesn't kill the Taiga, and when my turn ends, the Taiga is standing right there. Fortunately, throughout this process of fighting and all that stuff, I am able to move Achilles into a safe position where he is, downstairs. This is my position at the start of my opponent's turn 2. He revealed his lieutenant down here to spotlight Akmon as Akmon was going for the Taiga. I also have Hector, McCann. I think McCann should have been prone. We might have lost the token. Phoenix on ARO. And then Ajax, not only is he on ARO, but he is also watching the Specular Killer down there in case that's going to be a problem. The first thing my opponent does is he takes this Taiga that's over here somewhere and slings it into Phoenix, puts Phoenix on WI, but I'll be able to fix that later. It just means that Phoenix can't be as aggressive in ARO as he normally would be. Next up, my opponent is going to use Bit and Kiss. I believe he reloads the 2 of them off of the Ichadrons, and he moves into this position. First, he puts a repeater there, and I don't exactly remember, but I think Ajax was in range of the repeater. And the second thing he does is he moves Kiss, the remote, out here. And what he's doing here is he's provoking an arrow from Ajax. If Ajax resets, then Kiss is going to shoot him with the adhesive launcher. And if Ajax dodges, then he's going to get an Oblivion from Kiss. Now, I know what of those 2 things I'm more scared of. Kiss is like ballistic skill 8, and I've got mimetism and cover, so that's not going to be all that scary to me. More importantly, even if he does hit, I have to make a Fizz -6 roll. That's still a 10. So Kiss could spend 1,000 orders just not doing anything to Achilles, whereas Oblivion would knock me out of the link, and that would be really annoying. So he is going to reset, and I believe that he is successful at resetting, or maybe he tanks the hit from Oblivion, and he's able to back off into that position. After having done that, my opponent is thinking he's got to do some sort of attack, and so he takes his Q-drone, runs it all the way up here, and is able to see Hector. This is a little bit scary for me because if he kills Hector, then I'm going to be in trouble, but Hector does have armor 5 and a boatload of wounds, and if he doesn't successfully take this guy out in a single order, Hector will guts to cover. And as you can see, what happens is Hector takes a wound and is able to guts to safety, and I don't have to really worry about that. The other issue that my opponent is facing is that he cannot contest Phoenix. Phoenix will throw smoke in order to block line of fire, or Phoenix could potentially just like out gunfight this thing. Probably that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but the point here is that mimetism -6 makes Phoenix very scary. And so the Q-drone has to be careful in how he does this, and it eats up a couple of orders, and he's only able to get 1 good shot off at Hector. After that, he decides to spend 1 more order getting into this position, and also he takes shots at my flashball spots. One of them successfully dodges, which is unusual. Flashball spots never successfully dodge, but this one does. But this one does go unconscious. The only last thing is the lieutenant order is spent recamoing the anathematic. So here's the position at the start of my turn 2. I have lost a flashball spot. I've got 2 wounds on Achilles. I've got 1 wound on Hector, but honestly, I am feeling extremely strong in my position. All I really have to do is keep this defensive position hunkered down, and I am golden. The best way that I can see to keep a defensive position while also, doing some mission-related stuff is by taking my Anomatarkos here, running over here, killing his Q-drone, maybe killing the repeater that's there is one of the targets that I have, but I don't actually accomplish that, and more importantly, his designated target is over there, and I want to kill that too. Normally, I might also like to use Achilles in this case, but because he's wounded and because the Q drone is burst 4, I just can't afford to risk him in an engagement where he might get knocked unconscious or worse, even die. Points do matter, and I'd rather keep Achilles as a big sack of points alive than use him as the attack piece that he'd like to be. So those 2 wounds that he took really did matter, but my Innovatarchos is more than happy to do the legwork here. I am a little bit dumb in how my movement gets done. I think I leave Hector in this building, so he's actually visible from over here. That's going to be relevant on turn 3. But aside from that dumbness, I am able to get my Innovatarchos. I murk this thing in melee. I set up in a defensive position with Phoenix right here. I have Ajax standing over here. I have Machaon, I think, downstairs maybe, prone. And more importantly, I also spend Akmon's order to Gizmo kit the Lamed, so the Lamed is able to get back up. So at the end of my turn 2, I have killed his designated target. I don't know if I mentioned that previously. I have killed his Q-drone, and I have undone basically all the damage that he has done. The only weakness is that my lieutenant is in a weak position, and my opponent is going to have to try to take advantage of that. The problem is his tools are a Caliban Forward Observer, who is over here, and his Anathematic. Arrayed against him are Hector, who is fairly tough, even if he is unlinked, and Phoenix, who should be standing up here in ARO, and the last thing that is arrayed against him is this Blizzard Zone, which is blocking his main right way for attacking. He's going to try to deal with Phoenix first and foremost, who's standing right here, by taking this Caliban, running over here, and then trading with the boarding shotgun. I am happy to allow this trade. I Nanopulsar the Caliban 2 times because I'm a little worried that the Caliban will go after and attack Hector himself. But once the dice fall, Phoenix, I have canceled his NWI with Machaon on previous turns, so he now has 2 wounds again, and he either tanks both of the boarding shotgun saves or one of the boarding shotgun saves. He doesn't die, or the Caliban fails at least one of the saves and is knocked unconscious. So it's Anathematic time, and Phoenix is up on ARO duty, and the Anathematic, who is hiding down here, is going to have to be the one to run up and kill Hector. And here's where all those criticisms of the Anathematic from the beginning of this video sort of come to roost. First off, the Anathematic is slow. At 4-4, he's going to have to spend a lot of orders simply walking all the way over here. During that process, Phoenix is going to get a Discover off. It fails. That's fairly likely because Phoenix is just not good at, discovering. However, Phoenix will then continue to be able to dodge, and that's what happens. Phoenix dodges out from his position somewhere over here until he gets to this really annoying close range position. Next up, the Anathematic only is burst 3 at BS 13. With Surprise Attack, Hector is going to be at a -3 to whatever his ARO is. It's probably a dodge, but burst 3 just isn't that many. Worse, there is a Blizzard Zone here, and because he's going to be attacking me from the Blizzard Zone, he's only going to be at burst 2. Being at burst 2, being at ballistic skill 13, I think he can get Hector out of cover, so that's 2 shots at 16. It doesn't matter that he ignores Hector's armor from the cover because it's plasma, it would do that anyway, but Hector has 1 wound in NWI left. He's got armor 5 and BTS 6. My opponent just doesn't have a very high chance, in my opinion, of actually killing Hector in a single order. And indeed, it just does not work out that way. Both shots go into Hector. Hector crits his dodge thanks to the -3 and thus avoids damage entirely. He dodges to out of line of fire to there or something like that. And this is really the key arrow that I think was really good on my part. Phoenix, instead of trying to gunfight the Anathematic, throws smoke, blocking the Anathematic's ability to take further gunfights on this regard. My opponent is therefore out of position with his Anathematic. It's way too far forward. He is out of orders. Maybe he has like 1 or 2 left to get to safety, and my position is really strong. That said, I don't know if this was a bad play. I think if the Anathematic had been perfectly castled up, there was a fairly good chance that I would still be able to just smoke my way up, intuitive attack to break the marker state, and then beat him up with Ajax. Moreover, my opponent is really far behind in terms of army kills, so no matter what, I'm going to get 4 points for designated target kills and 3 for the army kills. So if he kills Hector and loses his Anathematic, we both get 2 points and he gets tournament points. If the Anathematic dies, then his tournament points are still sitting at 4. And if somehow he gets lucky and kills Hector and the Anathematic survives, then he is going to get a 7-7 tie. So my opponent has made the correct play in choosing this strategy. It just, it doesn't work out. So it's my turn 3. I want to kill the Anathematic. And this is a picture of the outcome of what happens. My order pool is fully intact, so all I have to do is throw lots of smoke and then get people into melee and then beat them up in melee. And that's exactly what I do. I run all the way over here, I throw smoke here, I throw smoke here, I throw smoke here. I very carefully make sure that there's nothing dangerous that can happen to me as I get into melee, and then I get into melee. Ignore the facing on the anathematic, by the way. We had both agreed that the anathematic would be facing the correct way. I think actually my opponent gets lucky and does wound Ajax once, but it doesn't really matter. The anathematic only has a shot close combat weapon, and Ajax is super duper deadly. I kill the anathematic, I have 298 points and 10 OP, and that concludes the game. If I can give some commentary on the game, one thing that worked really well in my favor, in addition to the luck that I had on the first turn, is that my opponent was not experienced in how to handle a list like mine. He clearly intended to attack with his Taigas and Dodorausis and Speculos, and the fact that those pieces were completely ineffective against my list really threw him off tempo. Yes, the Taigas were able to berserk into Achilles and deal 2 wounds, but the odds of that were fairly low. Later on, Phoenix takes a wound from a berserking Taiga, but again the odds were low, and I was just able to fix that with Machaon. Using the Speculo Killer on the designated targets was the right play, and the fact that he got unlucky is a property of Monofilament that Speculos can't avoid. That said, my opponent did have the tools to get at me. If on his first turn he had dropped pitchers next to Hector with Bit and Kiss, he could have targeted me with the Anathematic and then rained missiles on my head, killed Hector and gotten rid of those 3 orders, maybe isolated Achilles, maybe targeted and killed Achilles. It would have hurt, but by the time my opponent realized that the missile launcher was the right tool, I had already killed it because he had left it on ARO. So if my opponent had thought about how to handle my list in general, if maybe he'd watched this YouTube channel, I think the game could have gone differently. I don't think I would have automatically lost. I am a fairly robust player, and Reinforced Tactical Link means I wouldn't be in Lost Lieutenant, but I do think the game would have been a lot less one-sided than it currently was. This does perhaps foreshadow a future in which I stop playing the big boy list as regularly as I do. If I start running into pitchers every single game and I start losing every time I go second, that's going to stop being fun and it's going to stop being interesting. And maybe I'll have to start thinking about a paired list to deal with that. But when and if that happens, I will definitely make a battle report out of it. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.